I'm gonna try to make this look like me. So if it were to look like me, I'd have to go with this because this is actually what my face does. I grow a natural goatee. There's no hair here, no hair here. But this is what I wish my face would look like. So we're gonna go with it.
Hey, what up, Jericho here. So I recently started testing out streaming over on Twitch, and after not being able to beat the login boss in Spacebar Simulator, Wayfinder.
Okay. So if you spend an hour trying to get in and you press ESC once, you get sent back to the loading screen. Sounds about right. So, Baldur's Gate.
Now, 2023 so far has been a year of extremes, with many highly anticipated titles having horrible releases, especially on PC. The main recurring problems were, well, they just didn't work. Game-breaking bugs, server issues on launch, or poor optimization, often because most of these games were coded for console or even mobile, and then extremely poorly ported onto PC. Some of them lacked major features that were promised during marketing, and on top of this, most studios decided it was a great idea to crank up the already aggressive monetization all the way up to 11 during a period when inflation doesn't exactly make the average gamer eager to pony up even more cash for a worse product. Add on top of this games that are, well, just plain old bad, and others that can't seem to stop trying to cram political agendas down your throat, and we're getting really close to the proverbial straw that broke the camel's back for most people who were already disillusioned with the state of the industry to begin with.
Blend in a whole lot better if you shut up.
On the other hand, we also have a race on our hands for Game of the Year, and it's only mid-August. Legend of Zelda Tears of the Kingdom, Final Fantasy XVI, and even Diablo 4 initially, for all its faults we discovered later, were all outstanding releases that drew both critical and player acclaim, and Starfield and Armored Core haven't even come out yet. But one game in particular, for me at least, casts a shadow on them all. Since its release on August 3rd, when it moved from a lengthy early access period to a full release on Steam, Baldur's Gate 3 has taken the gaming scene by storm, and developer Larian Studios has become a poster child for gamers around the world that want to see gaming go back to some of the values that made so many fall in love with the industry all those years ago. The game had already quietly generated a lot of interest, selling 2.5 million copies during its almost 3 years in early access, but since then, that number has risen to 5.2 million, and while Larian predicted a concurrent player count of 100,000 after release, reality far exceeded their expectations with a whopping 815,000 players online at the same time on Steam during the first weekend. Not only that, but this number actually went up during the second weekend, which is almost unheard of, as for most large titles, interest usually drops off after the hype around the release. It hit 875,000 players, which puts it in the top 10 all-time peak concurrent player count charts on Steam, just shy of games such as New World that hit its peak during its extremely anticipated release, Hogwarts Legacy that is fueled by the huge Harry Potter fandom, and Elden Ring that actually won Game of the Year last year. Reception was outstanding. Baldur's Gate 3 currently claims the top spot on Metacritic for highest user and critic score for any PC game ever. And it's not even close. Also, if you follow gaming, you know how rare it is for these scores to be anywhere near each other recently, right? And this isn't even the end of the story. This game is currently only available on PC. It is coming to Mac and PS5 on September 6th and Xbox later this year or in early 2024, and while Larian have not sunk tens or hundreds of millions of dollars into bombastic marketing campaigns, there's an old saying that the best kind of marketing is word of mouth. And you can clearly see that here, as the enthusiasm around the PC launch has already put Baldur's Gate 3 at the top of the PS5 pre-order list, so we can only expect more people to be getting in on the action pretty soon. And how did they do this, you might ask? Well, it was a complete game on release without major game-breaking bugs or missing features. Shocking, I know. They had a strict no microtransaction policy, and they definitely didn't play it safe on the story. I mean, you can get intimate with a bear if that's your cup of tea. If that doesn't tell you that they're not holding back on creativity, I honestly don't know what will. You have so much freedom to play out your ideal fantasy that it feels like you can literally do anything you can think of in the game, and your choices actually do matter and change the story, sometimes in very impactful ways. I mean, just take a look at this YouTube video that you can find linked in the description below of a troop of naked halfling barbarians that just indiscriminately kill everyone and everything in their sight, including some of the main characters in the story and crucial NPCs. And when you contrast this to the on-rails experience that we're accustomed to seeing from major titles in the last few years, you can start getting an idea of why people are loving this as much as they are. In short, Baldur's Gate 3 is the exact opposite of what the gaming community has been seeing from AAA studios that seem increasingly disconnected from their player base's definition of a good and fun game, all while doing a great job at coming across as more preoccupied with deploying any and all tactics available to increase their internal metrics like player retention and revenue per user, oftentimes at the detriment of player experience. But what really caught my attention was this post from Larian from August 11, 1 week after launch. They revealed that during the initial weekend, players spent a combined 10 million hours or 1,225 years playing the game. They pet a dog 750,000 times, talked to 1.4 million corpses, which is a nice shout out to anyone who saw the recent Dungeons & Dragons movie, overwhelmingly picked to play a custom character, which is no surprise, and there was a lot of balance in terms of interest to play all the classes available in the game. As someone who has stubbornly made a paladin in WoW for the last 20 years, this chart made me laugh and cry at the same time because, well, reasons. Now, this is the crazy part. 88 years total spent in character creation during the first weekend. That seems wild, so I actually decided to test this out live. I have to mention, this is not a speedrun attempt. I have not looked up anything about this game before recording this, and while I am familiar with Dungeons & Dragons, I am by no means an expert. This is not me min-maxing or going for any kind of efficiency in particular, but rather taking my time to explore the options and creating the fantasy that I would like to play. For full disclosure, I am definitely biased by nostalgia here. I grew up in a country that had a revolution as I was born, so when I was a kid, there was no digital download, Amazon, or even local GameStop. You literally had to know a guy in the back of the women's clothing section in the department store that could get you rip CDs of game compilations, and that's how I got my hands on a lot of games in the late 90s and early 2000s. Baldur's Gate 2 was one of these games, so I definitely have a lot of memories related to this IP that are creeping out of the woodwork as I step back in after so many years. That being said, let's go ahead and start the timer. In terms of appearance, you have ample customization options. You can choose between several face and voice presets for each race, plenty of hairstyles and body art. There is no option to fully customize each individual part of the character's face or body, but I actually prefer it this way since, while cool, the other approach can lead to a rabbit hole of obsessing over each minute detail for hours on end. Most options aren't gender locked, so you can go wild here, and while I don't think it's a good idea to show this on stream, you have the option to go full Monty, and NPCs will even notice your exhibitionism and compliment you on your junk. Nice cock, friend.
I'm gonna try to make this look like me, so if it were to look like me, I'd have to go with this, because this is actually what my face does. I grow a natural goatee. There's no hair here, no hair here. But this is what I wish my face would look like, so we're gonna go with that.
You can pick from one of 11 races, some featuring distinct sub-races, each coming with their own passive bonuses and traits, but for this playthrough, as I usually do in most games, I'm just gonna go with a plain old boring human. In terms of classes, you have the usual D&D options, and if you asked me 20 years ago when I was sneaking out of my parents' house with a floppy disk of my offline saves of my Paladin in Diablo 2 to buy the 8 or 12 hour bundle in the local internet cafe that eventually got me into playing a Paladin in WoW, I would probably pick that class, along with 13% of people playing Baldur's Gate, and roughly 90% of the population of retail WoW after the Paladin rework.
Oh, wow, okay, yeah, so there's a few rep paladins in this BG. We got a rep paladin or two. Is this what, it's like now?
In the meantime, though, my preferences have shifted toward more agile, versatile damage dealers that can ideally use both ranged and melee abilities. You saw me playing Rogue in Diablo 4, and after a little bit of deliberation, I decided to go with that here as well. Now, you shouldn't worry too much about this, as you will get the option to change your main character's class quite early on in your playthrough, and you can also take advantage of the dual class system and add a second class to your character, forfeiting higher level perks of your original class. Next up, you pick your background. You have several options here, each offering a boost to 2 abilities, and this choice can also add flavor to your adventures. From time to time, certain minor or major choices you make in the game can be viewed favorably by characters with a specific background. This grants you up to 4 inspirations, points that can be used to re-roll that time you rolled a 1 on a 2 difficulty skill check, and gives you an option to redo an interaction where luck just wouldn't give you a break without feeling cheesy about hitting the load button, since you actually earned the right to do so by your past actions. Most common background choices to complement the rogue class, I guess, would be charlatan, criminal, or urchin, but here I'm actually going to go with guild artisan, since I want to vent my frustration at the lack of a good MMO that places any sort of emphasis on player economy, crafting, and trading. I also vaguely recall that perception can be massively overpowered for some of the old school D&D games. Next up, ability points or attributes. You get to determine your character's strength, dexterity, constitution, intelligence, wisdom, and charisma. Each class has a main attribute indicated by the star symbol here next to dexterity for the rogue class, for example. 10 is the neutral level, and each 2 points above or below this gain you a plus or minus 1 to skill check rolls associated with that attribute. More on that later. Overall, this is quite straightforward. You have an ability point budget to spend, and each point costs 1 skill point from your budget up to 13 and 2 points per point past that. What you notice here again is, well, more freedom. You can knock yourself out and make a strength-based mage with no intellect whatsoever, or a charming barbarian that can't lift a small stone, although you probably will regret these choices down the line in your playthrough. Myself, I prefer to go for a jack-of-all-trades approach, and apart from dexterity, which is the rogue's main stat, I'm going to be focusing a little bit on wisdom and charisma, since this usually opens up what I consider some of the more interesting choices that let you skip encounters altogether, or gain access to hidden offshoots of side quests. I did sacrifice a bit of strength here to get the level of charismatic wise guy I was aiming for, but we can make up for some of this in the final screen, the proficiencies. Here you see the various skills that will determine the outcome of interactions your characters will encounter throughout the game, and while this part can be a bit overwhelming, especially if you aren't familiar with Dungeons & Dragons rule sets, don't worry, since it's a lot more straightforward than it looks, and in case you find your character is lacking in a specific skill you didn't plan for, you can always get around it by having one of the companion pre-made characters that excel in that skill tag along and let him or her deal with that specific interaction. Each skill has an associated attribute, either strength, dexterity, intelligence, wisdom, or charisma, that can add to or subtract to your proficiency from that skill. You also get bonuses or penalties from your choice of race, class, and background, and here you're also presented with a budget to boost the skills that you feel you want to focus on even further. The total level of proficiency with your skills is shown here by the +1, +5, etc. And this number gets added to or subtracted from your dice rolls for checks associated with that skill. I chose to go with a maximum boost to persuasion, which you can't see because it's all the way down at the bottom of the list and my big head takes up too much of the screen. Oops. I did this in order to gain the option to resolve a lot of the conflicts diplomatically, and then I went for insight, perception, and investigation since I want my character to know as much as possible about the world and its characters in order to make sure I experience as much of it as I possibly can. To round it off, I pick up a boost to athletics to offset the -1 penalty from having only 8 strength, and acrobatics because, well, it just sounds fun. And there you have it, just one more small step to go, name your character, and we have clocked in at just under 20 minutes, and let's see how that stacks up to the average player. While we do see the peak concurrent player count of 815,000 during the opening weekend, I actually couldn't find the exact number of total players, but we do have this chart that shows the distribution of class choices for the 93% of players that decided to create a custom character, so after deploying various complex mathematical estimation techniques...
What are you doing?
Honestly, I've been wondering that myself. I came to the conclusion that somewhere around 1.75 million players created a character. Now just some simple math and we can figure out that the average player actually spent around 26.5 minutes customizing their in-game avatar. Now I'm not sure if the Guardian customization counts as time spent in character creation, but I just let my girlfriend do that part anyway and it took her around 6 minutes. She made this really nice half-elf, by the way. So either way, this goes to show the average person did take roughly the same amount of time I did to pick and choose, and I was commenting all the way through, reading through the various choices, and taking my time thinking about them for quite a bit. After playing so many theme park MMOs and other RPGs that shoehorn you into very rigid class archetypes, this freedom that you have available here was a breath of fresh air that I didn't even realize I was missing, and brought back fond memories of playing Baldur's Gate 2, Neverwinter Nights, and Icewind Dale all those years ago. All in all, Baldur's Gate 3 is a masterpiece, and I'm thoroughly enjoying my playthrough even though I haven't been able to put in the amount of time it deserves quite yet since, well, I've been trying to learn how to make videos. Speaking of which, if you enjoyed this one, feel free to give it a like, subscribe to the channel for more content, and I hope to see you all again soon. Have a nice day, and enjoy Baldur's Gate 3.